Hey y'all, I'm Esmeralda. Welcome back to La Coalición. I'm here with two of my very cool colleagues, but I will let them introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, my name is Jessward Docena. I've been a community organizer for over 10 years, but I've also been a professional astrologer for about 2.5, 3 years, but have been practicing and studying astrology for 9+ years now. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Brian.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Sanchez. I am the lead organizer for the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice. Been organizing now for maybe around close to almost 2 years. Had experience in that, have no experience in astrology. So, very excited for this podcast to learn a bit more.
You know, me and Brian actually started on the same day. We signed
Yeah.
the contract same day within the same minutes.
And you're both cancers.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought she actually started later than I did.
No.
Oh, I think that's interesting. If you both like signed the contracts and started on the same day, there's like a birth chart for when you both started work. There was like a time if you signed at the same time, and then like obviously the sun or the season was in there. The moon was probably the same day, obviously. So just got out of a strategy session today. Just flew in from Oakland, California for this strategy session that was really amazing and put on by Esmeralda and the Shatan Adelanto Coalition, the Free Ligaya Coalition as well. But yeah, I'm excited to be here for this podcast to talk about astrology and organizing. And I guess like the icebreaker is to guess the signs, right? Guess the signs of the people here in the room.
Yeah, hopefully you weren't paying attention like a bit earlier because I think I did say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But just give it your best shot.
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of funny because I would have guessed. Well, no, I think those like line up pretty well. I think I might have guessed that, but I also would have guessed like some Taurus placements. But
Is it because of his outfit?
yeah,
Or-
yeah, definitely.
Wait, is it Taurus? Because like I got Western wear, kind of like cowboy
Just
stuff,
kind of
or
bougie, you know, like.
really? Oh, I'm kind of going for like working class chic, but all right.
Yeah, I was gonna guess Taurus placements because this is my first time like formally meeting you more or less, but I know that I've seen you like on the Shatan Adelanto Instagram as well as the social media, and I'm always like, yeah, you're just like super stylish. So Taurus rules like and is associated with like fashion and material security.
Well, I only own 5 shirts, so it's good to know that they're all good.
There we go. But we were gonna guess signs, right?
But yeah, I mean, I did say earlier, like I kind of like spoiled it at the beginning. I didn't realize that. We probably should have been guessing it. But I am, what is it? A Cancer Sun and a Leo Moon. So
Leo.
Leo. Oh,
Can
okay.
I see the rest of your chart?
I don't know if I could like figure the entire thing out. I mean, it's just like those are the only two ones I got. And there's more?
Yeah. There's a lot more.
Yeah.
Wait, how'd you look it up that it's a Leo?
I went on something called like a moon calculator.
Interesting.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
let me show you something then.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, like what does that say about me? I'm kind of curious.
Well, it's interesting. I could have guessed like maybe those two signs. The first one I would have guessed would be Taurus because Taurus is associated with like fashion and material security and like clothing and in the beginning, like in this organizing, I think of like, are my basic needs met? But if your basic needs are met, then like somebody might get like an extra like nice outfit and feel good in it, and that's what Taurus is associated with. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, but you said you're a Cancer Sun and a Leo Moon, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I would be curious to know whether that Leo Moon's like accurate. It probably is. That makes sense. But like, depending on the time that you were born, your moon sign could shift like back and forth between like the sign of or the sign before. But yeah, like Leo makes sense because Leo is also like associated with self-expression. So perhaps like self-expressing through fashion. Leo's associated with like beauty and yeah, creativity, and fashion and art is also creativity. But Cancer checks out because I don't know too much about you. We're just like kind of formally meeting, but Cancer's also associated with like food and family, and perhaps even like in this organizing work that we do in community organizing, it's associated with like food workers or protecting.
Ooh,
Like,
that's true.
yeah, definitely. Cancer is also a protective
I don't
sign.
think I could figure it out.
Okay, let me. What if you read it out loud? I'll plug it in for you.
All right.
You read it to me, okay? What time were you born at, Brian?
10 a.m.
Just exactly 10 a.m.
Yeah.
¿En dónde?
San Bernardino, California.
Oh, you from the Dina.
Kind of come full circle, right? Like I was born in San Bernardino and then I moved away and now I'm back. Draws you in.
And now I'm going to be the technical astrologer and ask, like, did you get that time from a birth certificate?
From a birth certificate, no, just kind of like anecdotally.
Okay.
My mom tells me like, yeah, he's like, yeah, 10 a.m. She would always joke that like, oh, you were born in the morning. That's why you're such an early riser.
Okay. Got it. Okay, I think like yeah, that checks out. That makes sense. But as like a professional astrologer, I always like recommend people to really look at like the exact time if they have it available to them, to look at a birth certificate, because like when our moms are giving birth to us, there's a lot going on in that moment and things like that. So the reason why the birth time is so important is because it determines the time of your birth determines your rising sign, and then that determines what your first house is out of 12, and then it will determine all the houses in zodiacal order after that. So depending on the minute that you're born, it'll determine your ascendant or rising sign, and then it will go in zodiacal order.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So like, yeah. Okay, so what we got here? So
up my whole
I'm
life
just
history
gonna
right there.
go off the planets if that's okay.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay, cool. So you have the sun in Cancer at 25 degrees. So the sun is it's our personality. It's your personality. It's your vitality, the type of energy that you bring into a room, like when you walk in, because when somebody's like a Scorpio sun or a sun in Aries, it's usually pretty obvious for the most part. Not always, but pretty much. But yeah, like the sun in Cancer would be like, it's like your personality is around initiating an emotional response or an emotion. It could be an emotion of like, I'm with you, we're going to talk about some memories, or it could be like initiating joy or initiating it's okay to sit in those emotions. But it's also like Cancer's the crab, so it's about protection. So it's got this hard shell but soft inside. So Cancers don't usually let everyone into their little tight-knit family or community all the time. But yeah, but once you're in, they open up more, and it's a water sign. So it's about initiating emotion. So it's a cardinal sign. So cardinal signs initiate. So, but then the moon in Leo, would you like to know a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to know that like Cancer is like pretty nice. Every time I've said like, oh, I'm a Cancer, my zodiac sign, just like the immediate like, just people like, oh.
I feel the same way. I feel like there's some bad stigma around being a Cancer. They'll be like, you're a crybaby, or like, what? I don't.
If I am?
I literally will like bite you too, like. But we are in a space together where we've come together due to organizing, and I feel like I've had some conversations with you, Jessward, before, where how organizing and astrology can work together, or have been in relationship together. So can you maybe like tell us a little bit about that? And I don't know, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Would it be good to like kind of just go start from the beginning? Like, what is astrology? So astrology is the study or the concept that celestial bodies or planets or even stars in space, especially the planets, like that their movements have an effect on earthly and human events. So the planets are pretty predictable for thousands of years, or even, since the beginning of time, they've always moved in a predictable mathematical way. And so that there's a correlation in their movements and how it affects human beings and their lives. And so That's kind of like the basic definition of astrology. And so when a person's born during Cancer season, like yourself or like you, that means something. And I think that there's a lot that goes into that. I think it's interesting. If you, I think it's interesting because if you think about the time of year that is, it's in the beginning of summer. I think there's something to be said about that in terms of like kind of the warmth or the love and the care that Cancer can provide in initiating like summer or initiating warmth and care. I think it's interesting that like also like when the sun is in Scorpio season, I also think it's interesting like how it relates to people born during Scorpio season, like what's happening during October and November. The ancients said that during Scorpio season, that the sun was in its fall. And then I believe that's actually where we get that name for the season fall, is that, oh, the sun seems like it's falling during this time. So leaves are falling. It's no longer summer. Things are kind of getting colder. And so if you have your sun sign in Scorpio, they might not be as warm as like a Leo on the surface, like right away. And I think that's really interesting to think about. And then also preparing for the winter. So Scorpios can sometimes have a lower expectation, or generally speaking, like a pessimism. And let's see if these actions fall through with this person or something like that. I'll hold my breath or something, or something like that. So I think that's interesting. Also goes with Capricorn season too, like end of December, early January. Like back in the day, like you really had to save your food during that time because you might not have any. And so Capricorn's associated with the initiation of like how to like allocate energy and resources. So yeah, I think that's interesting to think about, like how much energy am I going to put on this or use on this, or and it's also associated with not necessarily it can, like Capricorns can historically, especially if your moon's in Capricorn, you can go for like a long time with not necessarily having to eat, but needing to work through like the winter. And I think that's interesting, but there's a lot of things that go into that.
I'm thinking about you talking about like the seasons, like how does that work for that parts of the atmosphere that have different seasons, so like Scorpios I think would be different, right? If it's a different season, or like or it changed, like I y'all could cut this out later, but like what relationship does that have to do?
Yeah, I think that's what the tropical zodiac, to get a little bit more technical, is based on, like traditional tropical the northern hemisphere of it all in astrology. It's based on the seasons.
So then there's tropical astrology. What else is there then?
Sidereal.
Okay.
Sidereal, which I'm not like an expert in, but I'm a Western tropical Hellenistic astrologer. I can go into that a little bit, but yeah, I go by an astrology, and I use an astrology and apply it that most people do these days, and it's in line with the season. And if we even go before signs and planets, there's actually this thing which a lot of people don't talk about in astrology that's actually really important, which is about elements and modalities. Like, so what are the elements? There's water, there's fire, there's earth, there's air, but then there's also modalities. Like there's cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs. So cardinal's about initiating. Now we have signs that initiate spring. We have signs that's Aries. We have signs that initiate summer, fall, I believe. Yeah. So like these times, and so yeah, and then there's signs that kind of like sustain it or fixed, and then there's signs that are kind of like in the middle that are transitioning and they're mutable. Like I know Virgo, Pisces, and Sagittarius are signs that are mutable signs. They're kind of transitioning and they're in between different seasons. So
So how do we bring this back to organizing?
yeah, definitely. So with organizing, So the way that I apply astrology and organizing is that, um, okay, so I like to bring it back to the birth chart. So, like, what is a birth chart? So, a birth chart is that when a person is born, from their very first breath, if they themselves were able to, or their family was able to when they were born, they could step outside, they could look at the sky, and there would be a map, or in this place, like a map or a diagram or a snapshot of the sky when they were born. And the second that they take their breath, that represents the ascendant or the rising sign, which is like their character and their identity, and then themselves and their kind of average path that they'll take in this lifetime to achieve what they're supposed to be doing. The sun, where it's placed, describes their personality, and their moon describes their needs. And then all these different planets on this birth chart, it's a circle birth chart. It's divided into 12 different, I guess, slices or 12 different areas of life. We'll have your planets in different areas of that birth chart. And I think it's really interesting because I've read hundreds of charts for people professionally, and even before I was a professional astrologer, because I've been studying this for 9 years. I can meet a stranger, and as long as they know their birth chart, or we can generate it and cast their birth chart based on their time and the day their birthday. I can tell them a bunch of things that I should have no reason to know whatsoever. I can tell them where they're the most warm, like where their personality is showing up the most in life. What are their needs? Like for example, you mentioned you have a moon in Leo.
Yeah.
So that's a need for self-expression. I'm not exactly sure which area of life it is, because I would need like your rising sign, but it is a need for self-expression, creativity, fun, enjoyment, things for fun and enjoyment, like, this podcast and filming and movies, because Leo's the star. It's the fun.
In Virgo.
Based on that 10 a.m. sign or 10 a.m. time. Okay. Well, if that
what does that mean? 10, like rising in Virgo.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know whether your rising is in Virgo, because I would
Okay.
really like to get that time down. But if your rising was in Virgo, then your rising sign would be, again, your character, your identity, the average path that you take in life. And if it's in Virgo, what is Virgo? To sum it up, to be of service, to be an organizer. Could be actually that you were born at 10 a.m. because you are a community organizer, I imagine. And so, yeah, a Virgo needs to be of service. It needs to be of value. There's this kind of little funny thing in astrology, generally speaking, that they need someone to fix or some things to fix and stuff. So they're the troubleshooters and the helpers.
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna put that on my resume, like problem solver.
Oh, yeah.
I would definitely say that's a Virgo
My
trait
reference
for
is
sure.
my star chart.
I think that was a very like Virgo response too, like jobs, because Virgo's associated with like daily routines and day jobs and your jobs. So yeah, definitely. So
I can vibe with that. I do like routine, which sometimes like in the course of my organizing is kind of like I think what I run into the most trouble, since organizing is very dynamic. It's something that changes day to day, and at any moment, you think you have something figured out. You think you're like, all right, perfect. We've got this down pat. Something upends it, and for me, if according to what you said, like I'm very much routine oriented, which yeah, I am. It's very much like that always like puts me on edge, because I'm just like, oh man, like I really wish it was just like a process for all this, but there isn't. Especially with organizing, there just isn't like a process. There isn't like, oh, follow steps 1, 2, 3 for change. It's just something that you have to tackle. So yeah, pretty interesting how like that lines up.
I think it's interesting, going back to like a question you talked about, like about astrology and the seasons and all, and like when is Virgo season? It's like kind of the transition from summer to fall. And so it actually, even though it likes and it does value routine, Virgo is flexible when it needs to be, but definitely about the tasks and crossing them off and the checklist and the routines and keeping a tight fitness and exercise and health routine. But also it can be flexible, so because it's a mutable sign. So but I think like that need for like maybe like something set and not to be changed is like a moon in Leo a little bit. Like, because Leo's a fixed sign. It's about sustaining fire, about sustaining creativity. When I think of Leo, I think of the performer, or I think of the artist, and I think of performers and artists constantly sustaining like their creativity. I wanted to bring back in, like, I know that you asked like what is technically like astrology, and I kind of defined it for us. I wanted to also talk about the different branches of astrology, especially like under like Hellenistic or traditional astrology that I practice. That's been, practiced for now 2,000 years. But astrology is older than that. Astrology is probably one of the it is the oldest like science. It's not just a science though. I believe like astrology's in it has empirical components, but it also has like this religious kind of component a
What's
little bit.
empirical?
Empirical like observations and like recording like what your observations are. A lot of people would never think that astrology is like scientific or empirical, but like for thousands of years there were like families of sky watchers and people that went out into places where you can watch like the moving stars that they did not know were planets back then in lots of different cultures around the world, but recording their observations, like what happened in the village at this point. Now we have a lot more to work with. Like we can watch like what's happening all over the world. Right now it's Libra season. And we have seen and Libra represents the scales or justice and like equality or equal exchange. But in the type of work that we do, I equate that a little bit, those scales, to legislation and like law. And there has been a lot in the news lately about lawmakers and legislators and yeah, even like relationships in general. So yeah, but I also wanted to just bring us back really quickly to like the different branches of astrology. So I wanted to say that there is like natal astrology where a person has a birth chart from the time that they were born, and that where the planets were located in the sky, depending on when a person was born, will have a lot to say about what a person's life will end up being or how it will turn out. And then also like what are some certain qualities and characteristics that a person will have based on their rising, their sun sign, moon, all the way down to like Saturn, and even if you're a modern astrologer like Pluto. So that's like natal astrology, like what most astrologers do, looking at birth charts and talking to people about it in a one-on-one consultation. And then there's also electional astrology. Electional astrology has been something that's been practiced for thousands of years. It's when an astrologer works with somebody, or also can do it on their own if a person just asks them to do it, but to pick a specific date so the outcome is better for a person. So a lot of the way that this happens today is a person will sometimes go to an astrologer if they're into it to like elect the time and the day that they're going to get married. Like where's the moon going to be, and where's the sun going to be, and where is Venus going to be, or Jupiter luck, or Venus love, or even communication like Mercury. And the the day and the time that they elect will actually say a lot about like the success and the outcome of how the relationship or the marriage will go.
So can I like use astrology if I'm like planning on an action or a press conference or like sending out an email with like, I don't know, like can I use it for that?
Yes, that's how I use it, as both a professional astrologer, but also as a community organizer of well over 10 years. And now, knowing and studying astrology for 9 years now, you can certainly use astrology and electing the certain time of day based on the chart. Because even right now, as we're talking and doing this podcast, there's the planets are moving around in the sky. There's like a rising sign where the sky meets the earth, and there's a horizon. And oftentimes when I try to send emails, I'll send emails. Oftentimes, this is like just like a general rule. There's a lot more that goes into it, but if Jupiter's in the seventh house, because Jupiter is the planet of luck, it's also a planet of abundance. It's also a planet of fortune, of yes. Jupiter's a very positive, like, I want to do things for you. So if it's in the seventh house of others who you're sending it to, and you have Jupiter there, they might say yes if you're inviting them to an event or something like that. So, yeah. And you can use it to elect when you initiate a campaign. You can elect when you open a document and you start writing in it. And like there's like a rising sign in houses and a birth chart for like how that will go.
So how do you think this podcast is gonna go?
I think this podcast is going great so far.
I'm curious, is it like a bad time to send emails? You know, I'd really like to know that.
Well, you know what? Actually, even outside of astrology, but it's a little related to astrology. Yeah, like midnight would be a bad time to send an email, like even outside of astrology.
What if I do it at midnight, but I set it to go out at 8 a.m.?
I think like I would go, that would be based off of that 8 a.m. time more so.
All right.
Yeah. And I do that actually quite often.
I hope like it wouldn't carry over like to the.
Yeah, the bad energy goes with it.
Yeah. So there's that electing, electing when you're going to have meetings, when you're going to convene people. If you like have Mars at the top of the chart in like the 10th house of the public, or if you have Mars in the 11th house of like convening friends or large groups, or Saturn and like slowness, or Mars, which is like malefic action, or sometimes like not the action that you might want. It could also represent like difficult actions, and you have it in like the 11th house of like convening friends or something like that. There may be some positives out it that come out of it, but generally it depends, but not usually. It also depends on a lot of other things, but that's electional astrology, electing. And historically there have been figures throughout history, from emperors who had astrologer to even not too long ago. There were a few biographies written out that Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan actually had an astrologer named Joanne Quigley.
I've seen that too.
Yeah, that decided when he was going to have meetings, and when he was going to announce that he was going to run for president. And it was even some of his disgruntled staff would point out, like, why is he calling meetings at midnight, or why is he doing this? And it's because there was an astrologer, kind of consulting like when he should start things. And even there were certain things like that weren't like the greatest things about his presidency that he probably should have got more slack for, or probably like things should have stuck more to him. But I don't know if it quite did, or if he got like necessarily a lot of slack for it, because it seems like he got off a lot on a lot of the things that he did. So
I'm curious, would you say that like all throughout history, and then even like in modern times, there just seems to be individuals that just seem to like, this guy is always in the right place at the right time. It doesn't seem like like anything bad or negative comes their way. Would you like attribute that to astrology as well? Do you think they just like either they consciously know have some astrological knowledge, or just by sheer luck they're just like always?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think most people don't necessarily have like a strong like expertise or astrological knowledge. But I think just like naturally somebody could have been born with something about like maybe the planet of timing, or maybe Mercury, their communication and like their reasoning and thinking is like in a really good sign. Like it might be in its home sign, like Mercury's in its home in Gemini, or like exalted in Virgo, or like their Saturn, their timing and their work might be at home in like Capricorn, or it might be exalted in Libra, and so maybe that person just like really has like really good placements. So here's like I don't know if this is like astrology related, but have you ever gotten like multiple texts from different people at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah, so have I.
Fun thing about being an organizer.
Yeah. But maybe like for the last hour, you weren't necessarily receiving text from it, like anyone. But then the second it like turned to time, like all the people started reaching out at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would attribute a little bit of that, if not a lot of that, to astrology. There are certain planets that rule certain hours, and then every hour is ruled by a certain planet. So sometimes an hour is ruled by like Mercury. And if it's Mercury communication, if it turns that hour, like the minute it turns that hour, you will start receiving all your emails or a lot of your communications all at once. So
All of a sudden, they want to talk to you, right?
It's always
yeah.
like the worst time too.
Definitely. So we went over natal, electional, really quickly. There's mundane astrology, like world astrology. Like, I think it's like a mundane astrology is about observing the astrology of earthly events in the moment, like politics and things like that, noticing like where are the planets when different like things are happening in like the world. Back then it used to be probably like what was happening in the village or the community at the time, and now we have like that to work with, but we also have like the world. And so also there's one last astrology which is really interesting, which I'm studying and getting a little bit better at. It's called horary astrology. It's an astrology that I'm studying a little bit more and becoming a little bit more certified and expert at. But horary astrology is the astrology, the branch of astrology where you can go to an astrologer, and if you only one time and ask them this question once, like if you're missing an item like a wallet or a passport, or dare I say a pet, and if the pet got lost, you can go to an astrologer and ask them like, where is this located? And based on, the astrologer will cast the chart, and based on the chart, the stars will have something to say about where it is. And I've used this a lot of times, and I've gotten better at it, of like when my partner's dad, for example, like misplaces like maybe a wallet or something, keys, and then my partner's also an astrologer, and then we like cast a chart, and we try to figure out where it is. Is it in the light? Is it near something warm? Is it near something earthy or wooden? And I think it's really interesting and fascinating. But yeah, I think there's like some role for that in community organizing, but definitely electional and natal astrology, which I want to get to at some point. But yeah, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what does it say, oh, it's going to be under the tree? Or, like, what is, like...
It could be near water. It could be near, it could be in the light. Is it hidden? Yeah, there's like a lot of different scenarios.
Well, when you give us an example, because I want to, like...
Yeah, sure. Like, for example, if there's like if you were casting a chart for when somebody's looking for something, and a lot of planets are pointing to like the fifth house, it could be near an instrument, because the fifth house has to do with like creativity and performance and self-expression. And like, it really depends. You would have to like look at the rising sign. And one general rule that I'm kind of like now learning about is that I believe in horary astrology, usually the first house is the house of self, but I think in horary astrology the seventh house is the house of the astrologer, I believe. The 10th house generally, I believe, is like what activity is going on, and the fourth house is going to be the result, and where at the bottom of the chart of like what the result of it is and things. It's a lot more complicated than that, and like especially the moon is really important in horary astrology, because the moon moves the quickest and the fastest out of all the planets from our perspective. It's the closest to Earth. So if the moon moves like past Venus or something, or past like what you're looking for, it may have already gone and the time may have already passed. But if it's approaching something, then there might still be some time. And so some people use horary astrology in relationships, like, oh, did I blow with this person? Is there still time? And you can use horary astrology to be like, no, there's still time, or the time has already passed. And yeah, the stars are saying like, yeah, time has passed. So
That's scary.
okay, yeah, that is true. That could, yeah, but it could also be really used in helpful ways to help people. And at some point I want to go back to like how astrology really, like, simply, especially from the natal perspective, like just the birth chart of when you were born, like how it can be used in astrology. But
And I was like, after a lot of this, it all seems very interesting. I started thinking about, like, we always, bring it back to like, well, how does astrology connect with organizing? And like, just after everything you told me, and the very little I knew beforehand about astrology, I would say that people that are into astrology that are, very either very well versed in it, or has it's a very important aspect of their life. I would say I think that they would do very well in organizing, just because I could, for, like I said, from my own personal observation, I see that people that practice astrology, um, I feel like they're very much looking for a community. A lot of, like, from, like, each astrological sign is different, and but I feel like they all share a commonality of, like, empathy, of empathizing, and, like, getting in touch with, like, recognizing your own emotions, your own feelings. And I think that it, like, that extends to outwards, and that's why they're always very excited to find out, like, well, what's your astrological sign, what's your moon, what's your sign. I think they're it's very exciting to learn that about another person. And like I said, like, that search for community is, it's something they can find in organizing as well. And on another aspect of that, I think, like, um, I don't know if, like, our generation, Generation Z or millennial like myself, are, like, more more, like, practitioners of astrology than any other one in the past. But I would say that, like, it's much more prevalent in ours, and I think it's because, just like, the situations we find ourselves in now, the very unique moment I feel like we're in history. I think there's, like, a lot of feeling of, like, losing control, not knowing what's going to happen, just fear for the future. And I feel like astrology is something that the majority of us reach out for, because it gives us that, like, that feeling of control. Like you had mentioned, like, it's something that is almost mathematical. It's it's based on the planets that they've been there as old as time itself, practically. So and I feel like if that's what astrology gives to you, community organizing does the same thing. It's a little bit of control. It's a little bit of um, you know uh, that, like, that little bit of naivete that I think that, like, every community organizer should have, where it's like we think to ourselves, like, it can be better, and I think I don't have to be at the whim and at the control of forces outside of me. I feel like I can affect change, even if it's in my own community, or if it's in my own, just your own apartment complex, your own neighborhood. I'm curious, what do you think about that? Um, you know, that connection between, how astrology, is much more prevalent now, and then on top of that as well, um, you know, our generation and the subsequent one are much more socially conscious.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a lot that you touched on really quickly. I think that certain generations are a little bit more prone to astrology. There are planets that are associated with generations. Like the moon's not going to be necessarily associated with generation because the moon sign changes every 2.5 days. But like planets like Jupiter, your Jupiter sign's pretty much the same sign as everybody in your grade growing up, because Jupiter spends 1 year in a sign. Saturn spends 2.5 years in a sign. So anybody like roughly around 2.5 years, give or take, plus or minus from you, has the same Saturn sign, which has to do with like about restructuring and lessons and responsibility and duty and like your approach to like work a little bit more. But even farther out, like Pluto, Pluto spends about sometimes like 13 to like 18 years in a sign. And I think a lot of us grew up with like, I think millennials off a lot of them grew up with like Pluto and Scorpio. Scorpio is a very spiritual sign that's associated with like finding out like the hidden details and the hidden knowledge or the occult studies. And then like right after that was Pluto and Sag, which has to do with like institutional spirituality or religion and also teaching. So I find it that a lot of Gen Zers have Pluto and Sagittarius, and they're teaching a lot of people through like TikTok, for example. As previously, like the millennials were doing all the researching and finding out a lot of the things, and the advent of the internet a little bit more in the early to late 90s and things like that. But then like came Pluto and Sag. It's like, okay, now that we have that knowledge, how do we disseminate it and how do we teach other people with it? So there are certainly generational planets. I think astrology can really quickly be used to control outcomes. It can be used to like tell people As a community organizer, there's a lot of guesswork that goes on. Like when I first meet a person in the community, there's a lot of like questions and a lot of things that I have to get to. Just kind of like also a therapist. Like when you first meet a therapist, they don't know the client a lot of things. But if I have a birth chart in front of me, it will tell me a lot of things about how is it, what is their communication style, what do they value. Sometimes I may think what their needs are, but astrology will actually tell you their moon sign, like what do they actually need. And like their sun sign, like their personality and the warmth that they're going to show up and things like that. So there's not you don't need a whole lot of guesswork with astrology. And I think like a lot of people and organizers can use astrology in that way. So yeah.
All right, y'all. So today was a lot. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
And I know there's gonna be a second episode, and I know you'll educate us a lot more on that one too. But we go ahead and close out right here. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, but you can also follow us on our socials at IC4IJ. And yeah, it'll be cool. Thanks, y'all.